Welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast, presented by Orion Advisor Solutions and hosted by Dr. Daniel Crosby, Orion's Chief Behavioral Officer and New York Times best-selling author. Each week, Dr. Crosby interviews a fascinating new guest on a range of compelling topics, from literature to psychology to financial wellness. To learn more about Dr. Crosby's behavioral finance work at Orion, visit www.orion.com.
Hello and welcome to the Standard Deviations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Daniel Crosby, and today I'm joined by my friend Seth Streeter, founder and chief impact officer at Mission Wealth, a wealth management firm dedicated to helping their clients achieve greater impact and purpose in their lives. Seth, welcome.
Thank you, Daniel. It's great to be here with you.
No, thank you. It's great to have you here. So I'm going to start off. You and I are both TEDx speakers. We should be very proud of that. We should give ourselves big congratulations for that. And your TEDx talk is fantastic. And you begin that talk with an anecdote about elephants that really stuck with me. So could you share with the listeners a bit about this anecdote and then analogize it to our financial lives, if you would?
Sure. Well, when I was in fourth grade, I went to the circus for the first time, and I loved the show, but I particularly loved the elephants. I'm just an animal lover. And so after the show, I went behind the tent to see if I could get a closer look at the elephants. And I got around the tent and I was able to see the animals. And one of the things I was kind of surprised about is that these huge animals were tethered by a small little rope to a tiny stake in the dirt. And that kept them from moving. And I just sat there and thought, gosh, these huge animals could easily lift the stake from the ground. Why are they there? So I later researched that actually elephants are conditioned from birth by, steel stakes in the ground and steel chains that, hey, you can't get away from this thing. So later in life, even though they could, they believe they can't. And so the analogy kind of into wealth management, into humans, the tie-in is that, we humans also carry around limiting beliefs. And those limiting beliefs are oftentimes around worth and money. So whether that's a victim mindset or an abundance mindset, we carry those tethers forward. And so what I love to do as we work with clients is to help them untether and to kind of reimagine an expansive mindset of how they can have a healthier relationship with money in their lives.
This is going to get wonky fast. I'm a big existential philosophy guy, and there's a concept in existential philosophy known as negative ecstasy, which is these moments when we realize we're freer than we might like to admit. Like, I could sell everything, move to Japan, live an entirely new life, whatever, right? I could go try and be a comedian in Japan. I could, try and become an astronaut. I could do a million things, but I tell myself, nope, I gotta have this 9 to 5. I gotta make X. I gotta do this. My kids gotta do these sports, gotta keep up these appearances for the neighbors. So we have these moments where we realize we're freer than we might conventionally give ourselves credit for, but that can be kind of terrifying to us. What are some of these flimsy tethers that you see on the lives of people when you're dealing with people and their finances? What are some of these rope tethers you see in people's lives commonly?
Well, let's take a look at pre-pandemic and compare it to post-pandemic. Mm-hmm. Pre-pandemic, people believed they had to commute every day. They had to travel a lot. They had to sit in their cars. They had to go to an office. They had to sit in those same four walls. I've just got to do it. That's my job.
Yeah.
And the pandemic actually forced us to reimagine how we could work remotely, how we could actually have more life balance, have time to take a walk, spend more time with family, maybe listen to podcasts, and still get their work done. So that's a great example of a tether that we believed we had that we actually were able to reshift because of this external event that forced us to reimagine and reshift. So, when we're working with clients, I love to ask the question and say, if you were 10 times bolder, 10 times braver than you are today, what would you be doing with your business? What would you be doing with your life? What would you be pursuing that you're not giving yourself permission to pursue today? So it's just that kind of reframe from these restrictive self-narratives that all of us have held on to way too long, and to help empower people, give them that little friendly nudge to think beyond kind of their scope of what they believe is possible.
I like your framing there too, because when I hear similar questions, I feel like it's often framed as if you were 10 times wealthier, right? Like if you were 10 times richer, if you had all this money. And I think there's a lot to be said for framing it in terms of boldness or bravery and not wealth. because that's a shifting goalpost, right? And it sort of makes it outside of us. and says, oh, I would do X, but I'm not rich enough and I got to do the practical thing. That's a rope tether all day long. So,
well, and I would just say the definition of wealth as it's been traditionally set and the definition of success as it's been, traditionally defined for us is a tether also. I have to put my head down. I have to go through school. I have to get a job. I have to get promoted. I have to get a house. I have to get a mortgage. Like this is just this scripted linear path of success, which really isn't reality anymore. So when you help people look at a broader definition of wealth, we'll talk about 11 dimensions, then people can actually go, wow, I'm actually wealthier than I thought. Maybe my 401k balance isn't as big as I'd like it to be, but I'm actually wealthier in all these other dimensions than I realized I was.
Yeah, no, I love that. I love that traditional concept of wealth is a tether unto itself. We're going to get to the 11 dimensions. I think that's such a cool thing. When I became aware of your business, I thought that was such a beautiful framework for thinking about wealth and success. But in the TED Talk, you give a couple of definitions of wealth that I think are worth repeating. And you say that an advisor's number one job is not to make you money. So can you walk us through that? What should an advisor be doing if not helping you make money?
Absolutely. Well, advisors do want to, help clients optimize their wealth. So I'm not discounting that important role that we play with the basic fundamentals of portfolio management, financial planning, taxes, and estate planning. But to me, that's just the foundational level. From there, we can do so much more. And so tying into my definition of wealth, it's not just external, right? External is accumulating the house, accumulating the big 401k and IRA balance, but it's really about internal. And internal is about fulfillment. And fulfillment comes from having meaningful relationships, having experiences that are impactful, making a difference in the lives of others. It's about appreciating what you have. So all of these other factors, which are more internally based, is where someone can really be wealthy in this sense of fulfillment. So yes, having more money is nice, but I've worked with a lot of people who have $10 million homes that aren't that fulfilled. And I've done service trips, around the world with my kids with people that seemingly have nothing from an external standpoint, but intrinsically they're pretty content. So money isn't necessarily a direct correlation to happiness. Up to a certain level it is, but above and beyond that, once they know their food, shelter, and clothing is covered, that much more wealth doesn't necessarily lead to that much more happiness.
Yeah, you give a great anecdote about a service trip that I won't spoil here, but it's very touching that you give. And I was a missionary for 2 years in the Philippines, and found that the Philippines, which is a developing country by all measures, much less wealthy in monetary terms than the U.S., there was a level of joie de vivre and just joy and compassion and happiness in that country that I've seldom witnessed in the wealthiest country on earth. So I do think that travel can expose us to these things as well. So before we move on from the TED Talk, tell us the name of it so everyone can go watch it. And by the way, realize that you are 8 feet tall when they watch this thing. I had only ever spoken with you on Zoom. I was unaware that you were 8 feet tall.
Well, not quite 8 feet, but I am 6'6". So yeah. And I had to stay on that red carpet just like you and, stay within the circle. So it's called The Untethered Life, Wealth Redefined. Someone can just Google my name, Seth Streeter TED Talk, and they can find it. And yeah, I really appreciate your talk as well. And it's a great platform to be able to share a message.
Yeah, absolutely. Worth your 15 minutes. So let's talk about these 11 different dimensions of wealth that your firm uses to assess wealth. You do it in a rigorous and formal way. I feel like a lot of firms talk about this at a high level. I see very few that are sort of assessing it in talking about it in as concrete and objective and formal a way as you all do. Tell me how you arrived at the 11 different dimensions, and we're not going to give them all away. We want people to go check it out. But if you could speak to maybe 2 or 3 that are perhaps a little unconventional and talk about the impact they have on the way you work with clients.
Sure. Well, first, just to frame it, we in the industry have seen how there's this movement up the value stack of advice. Yeah. So the basic commoditization of portfolio management, that's something that now you can get with a robo platform and, lifestyle funds. So advisors are differentiating by adding customized investments. So, okay, I can work around concentrated stock. I can do ESG screenings. And, some of that is now available with technology. So financial planning is the next step up the value stack. And so being able to provide comprehensive financial planning, getting in details with specialization is of great value. But even above and beyond that is assisting clients through these critical life transitions. And that's really requires life coaching. That requires the EQ, kind of these softer skills going from the head to the heart. And so the 11 dimensions of wealth was really around helping to provide that type of framework and support with a set program to help clients look at their lives, especially as they go through these key transitions in life: retirement, selling a company, divorce, and so forth. So just to give 3 of the 11, I guess I'll stick with the analogy of the pandemic. A lot of people felt their financial lives were upside down when the pandemic kicked in. If they had a business, they were maybe furloughing employees. They were just making tough decisions. And yet, if we look at 3 dimensions of your physical, your family, and your intellectual, those are 3 of the 11. People physically actually had more time to exercise, to walk. They spent more time in nature. They're eating more home-cooked meals. People actually became healthier during that time. A second one is intellectual, right? We had time to listen to more podcasts, read more books, have more meaningful conversations with friends and family. A lot of us grew intellectually during that time. And then a third one would be family, quality of and connection to those closest to you. People had a lot more family time during the pandemic. And there's other dimensions too, but those are just 3 because you asked for 3. So your physical health, your family, and then your kind of intellectual growth, those are dimensions that all actually expanded. Even if your 401k balance went down a little bit, those other dimensions of your life wheel actually inflated most likely.
So in March of 2020, did you find yourself in your conversations with clients sort of pulling out this wheel, these 11 dimensions, and saying, look, let's focus on, perhaps the 3 that you mentioned? And what was the impact of those conversations?
Sure. Yeah. Well, the first thing we did is we help people where they are. So that usually started with a financial concern or a financial question. So we always start where clients are. We don't just go straight to, life coaching conversations. You help them address what's in front of them. But then as you work through kind of navigating those financial questions, then we would incorporate these different inspired living programs that we have to help them reframe or help them reimagine what's next. A lot of people had to completely reimagine their careers, reimagine their businesses, and make key pivots to what products or services they delivered. And those that were able to be nimble and adaptable actually did quite well, many of them. So we use this framework to help expand people's mindset. And we have these inspired talks where we bring in incredible speakers. You've been one to help people kind of reimagine purpose, health. We had Dan Buettner who talked about health and longevity from the Blue Zones. We had Chip Conley talk about purpose and legacy. We had Dr. Elizabeth Lombardo, who's a psychologist, who talked about resilience and the importance of up-leveling relationships. So we gave people additional perspectives to kind of noodle on. And then we got together in what's called conversation circles where people could share with other clients, their peers, and other advisors to share what's come up for them and to learn from each other. So I think a lot of the value has actually been through crowdsourcing wisdom from our client base and having them connect with their peers and go, gosh, I am grateful for what I have. And I didn't think about it that way. And now I have some new connections I didn't have before. So it's financial planning and portfolio management, but then plus adding in the inspired living on top makes for a really winning combination to connect with clients in a deep way.
It's interesting. I've long thought it would be a competitive advantage for advisory firms to connect their clients with one another. And yet I very seldom see that happening. I mean, in many respects, you're going to share a lot in common, often a level of professional success, often values, things like that. I think it's brilliant for advisors to say, hey, you should know each other and take pains to really connect their clients. There's a lot of great relationships that can be formed friendly and business-wise. I think there's a ton of value there that's fallow in most advisory practices. I think that's a brilliant twist. So in addition, you've done some writing on some topics that really touched me. I think the first one is a constant struggle for me as a parent. On the one hand, I want to give my kids the world, right? I want to give them every good thing in life. And insofar as I've been blessed, I want to bless their lives. But I also worry about spoiling them. I worry about them not being appropriately self-reliant. And I think that's a concern a lot of parents have You wrote a piece about this. What can you teach us here, and what is the role of the advisor, if any, in helping to shape the well-being of and the self-reliance of that next generation?
Sure. Well, as a parent with you, Daniel, it's an ongoing journey, and I would say, back to client sharing, one of our best events was we did a client event called The Art of Giving. And we put clients together in small groups and we had them talk about giving to children, what's enough, what's too much, giving to charity, how to do it in a meaningful way. So this is a great opportunity for advisors to actually crowdsource ideas around this subject. What comes up for me is, actions speak louder than words. That's such a truth. And so as parents, how we think about wealth, how we act with wealth is really going to be emulated by our kids most likely. So how we want to have our kids, have a healthy relationship is what we need to be doing. So if someone is working for the weekends and they're just grinding through their job and they're not satisfied with a great sense of fulfillment or purpose, well, you know what? You're emulating that for your kids. There's a great quote I love that's the biggest loss to a child is the unlived life of a parent. So, how are we living our lives by example for our kids? That's number one. Getting into financial literacy is, of course, important in a way that advisors can help Gen 2, Gen 3. So helping them understand, about diversification, compounding interest, what's a stock, what's a bond, what's an ETF, and empowering them to even open up their own accounts. Maybe, they have a little bit of money and advisors can help parents set up a Roth IRA for their kids. And so once they start managing and investing and having these conversations, maybe getting into the ESG conversation, should they, have their values aligned with their investing, that's really key. And hopefully helping kids understand that money is a tool, right? Money is not the prize. Money is just a tool. You need to live your life by design, be in the fullest expression of who you are and your gifts and your passions, and money will follow. Don't do it the other way around.
During the pandemic, there's a lot of value. The research shows there's a lot of value in being upfront about your giving and even being vocal about your charitable efforts with sort of your broader community and social media. I know that intellectually I've not been able to do it because it still feels tacky to me. Like I know that there's upside to it, but it feels weird and gross to me to like put on Facebook what I'm doing charitably. However, one thing that I have embraced is bringing my kids in on every sort of philanthropic decision we make as a family, and they get so much value out of that. And during the pandemic, we had some, we were like, look, mom and dad are employed. We're doing well at a time when other people aren't. Help us direct some of this giving. And they had such a blast doing that. Now, they learned that if you give to the World Wildlife Federation, they'll send you stuffed animals, and so we had to nip that. They got they were giving to get stuffed animals there for a minute, but we redirected some things. But it was really a valuable thing for them, and I do think that it's even valuable to share with your larger network if you can sort of overcome that hurdle that I have candidly not overcome myself.
Right. Well, just to touch on that, when both of my kids were in fifth grade, I had the opportunity to work in their classrooms and do a very simple talk around 3 buckets of money. And I actually created a jar and had 3 jars with the label, give, spend, save. Mm-hmm. And so when the kids had leftover lunch money or a little bit here or there, they put them into each of those jars. And so the give jar, they got to decide as a class, and parents contributed to it as well, what local organizations they wanted to support. And so they actually picked, my daughter's class picked a marine mammal rehab center. And so they got to go see sea lions that had been rehabbed, that had been pulled from the ocean, and see that their money went to giving them medical supplies and food. And so connecting with kids on the giving piece, I find is absolutely the best first way to get engagement, because that is something they're passionate about and they can, share what they're interested in. You can give them firsthand experience. And so from there, that's going to drive engagement. And then later, kind of the other components of financial literacy can step in. But the giving is a great first entry point when your kids are younger.
Do you encourage families to talk to their children about their income level and their net worth? I think about my own experience. I had a vague notion that we were middle class, but didn't know much beyond that. And then I felt like when I entered the world of work, I kind of got hit with a ton of bricks by saying, I guess the way that you grow up is your normal. So I think everyone sort of benchmarks relative to the way they grew up. Is it a parent's job to help their kids understand where they sit along that continuum, even if it means sharing some sensitive financial information with them?
I believe that being age appropriate in this is really critical. So when my kids were younger, I didn't necessarily show them my balance sheet, but I would let them understand when we went to the grocery store, we played a guessing game. How much did this grocery bill cost? So they had awareness of what things cost. Now that my kids are teenagers, I actually do show them my complete balance sheet. I show them my estate plans. I talk to them about, what this means and what opportunities we have from it, so that they can see the correlation of empowerment when you steward wealth in a mindful way. So I think that it's up to each family, but the families, the 70% that doesn't transition in higher net worth families from one generation to two generations below, the largest component of that 70% failure is a miscommunication or lack of communication. Mm-hmm. So 60% of that 70%, in fact, studies have shown, is miscommunication or lack of communication. So I tend to believe that transparency, being really clear and open with kids, is going to help them be better stewards. Because if you don't bring it up or you lie to them and say, hey, we're giving it all away, you're not going to get anything. And then when those kids actually do inherit wealth, they're not, empowered to do anything with it that's probably going to make a lot of sense. You're not doing anyone favors. So I would rather be open, transparent, have clear communication. And I think ultimately kids can handle it. And it's an opportunity for them to then say, great, I want to be part of the team. I want to partner with my parents as we think about our giving, or as mom and dad think about retiring, or think about my college. Okay, they'll cover undergrad. I have to pay for my grad school. Okay, I understand why that's the case. So open communication to me is always the default bias that I have.
Yeah. You give a really touching story in your TED Talk about a gentleman who's sort of working away at a job he hates to maintain an elevated lifestyle, and transitions to being, I believe, as a history teacher, right? Mm-hmm. And you've written a piece in the Wall Street Journal about helping clients who are unhappy in their jobs change careers. In the example that you gave in the TED Talk, and in the examples that spring to mind, I see how this works for people who are wealthy. Is this something that middle class, lower middle class folks can do as well? How should advisors think about this? Or is this sort of a pipe dream for all but the wealthiest folks?
Well, yes, the short answer is yes. This can work for all kind of caliber of workers and professionals. My definition of the career dimension of wealth is, if you're working, are your values and passions aligned with your career, and are your talents appreciated? So if everyone has talents, everyone has unique abilities that hopefully will be appreciated and hopefully can be utilized in the work that they do. There's this book called The Leap where they talk about these 4 levels: your level of incompetence, your level of competence, your level of excellence, and your level of genius. No one wants to work in the level of incompetence. And yes, we can work in a level of competence. I can wash dishes fine, but that's not going to be my areas of excellence or genius. So all of us have abilities to take our natural innate gifts combined with our skills and experiences, maybe it's through education or hands-on work, with our greatest passions, what we love to do, and in an area that the world needs most. And how we intersect our gifts, our skills, our passions with what the world needs most, that can be an inspired life purpose. And it doesn't mean you have to make a ton of money doing it, but it means that you're going to be fulfilled there and you're going to be appreciated for what you bring. So yes, I think all of us can find ways that our contributions can be well received, and we can feel good for bringing ourselves fully into that role.
Yeah, I love the way that you think about the role of an advisor. It's really expansive, I think, relative to the traditional sort of stereotypical way that we think about it. But you really are touching, with these 11 different pillars, you really are touching every part of a person's life, financial and otherwise. And you can see how you'd have a client and a friend for life if you were able to help them transition into a role where their talents were on full display and their work was appreciated at whatever income level. Or yes.
Yeah, I have a quick story of that besides the one in the TED Talk. We had a woman we were working with who, after 30 years, her husband left her. It was a really sad time she was going through. She had plenty of money. She had enough money to be fine, but both of her daughters had also empty nested and had moved to the East Coast. She was living in California. So here she is without this relationship she'd had since just out of high school. And being an active mom, her daughters are off, and she was really sad, really depressed. So in working with her, we realized that, what is it you love to do? What is it you're natural? And she was a natural nurturer. She was really into natural products. She was into caring for people, and she was passionate about helping young women who'd been through domestic violence situations. And so we ended up kind of working with her, and she had this aha that she wanted to be an esthetician, and she wanted to give facials and massages to women who were really struggling. And so she started a business. She got her esthetician license. She, out of her home, had a room for this. And so she started working with amazing women, and she developed relationships with them where she felt she was really supporting them and nurturing them. And that made her less lonely. It gave her a sense of purpose, and it really helped her through this tough time. She didn't need the money, but she was doing something she was great at that really brought light to others, and that fulfilled her as well. So it's very possible that we all have these possibilities to find meaningful work above and beyond what we actually do as our day job. And so a lot of us just don't take time to think about what are these other flexes that I could bring into the world, that maybe I'm an artist, maybe, you're a natural singer, and so you should be singing. Maybe you're a photographer. Maybe you're a great youth counselor at an outdoor school. We all have these other opportunities to bring ourselves into the world. And I just like to encourage people to think openly about that.
You really have to approach money from a systems perspective. When I wrote The Behavioral Investor, I looked at investment decision-making from a psychological, physiological, neurological, sociological level. And it shocked me. And I mean, this is my work. And it shocked me how something like happiness impacts financial decision-making, how something like fullness, hunger and satiety impact things around financial decision-making. So certainly, if those things matter, then your work matters and your relationships matter. So again, back to those 11 pillars, I think we have to take this systems perspective if we're going to truly help our clients. Staying on this as we help our clients through their lives paths, sometimes there's these unexpected bumps. You've talked about how going through a divorce was one of the critical pieces of bringing you to a new realization of what true wealth was and what mattered and how you should be spending your time. Now you help other families who are going through transitions and divorces and deaths and other difficult things. How can advisors best support their clients during a divorce or a hard time? And what's the appropriate level of intervention or closeness, if you will?
Sure. Well, first, just from a self-definition, I think it helps when advisors see themselves not in the transactional world of, selling products or just optimizing finances. We're there to be a positive catalyst in our clients' lives in whatever way we can. And it's such a privileged seat to be on the inside circle with clients and have them share with us these transitions and these hopes and fears and sadnesses that they're dealing with. So kind of like we're not just laying bricks, we're building a cathedral. I would start by saying advisors need to see themselves in this privileged seat where we're in the human transformation business. We're helping people evolve forward. So when someone goes through a tough time, I think the first step is to really understand that this is likely going to be a wake-up call for this client. And it's going to be hard, but there's going to be some positive elements to it. And so what we need to do is we need to learn to be present during these times. We need to create that space where we can be vulnerable with them, not just let them be vulnerable, but we need to be vulnerable with them to create that space and empathize. And by offering kind of appreciative inquiry, asking questions, not having answers, but just holding space and asking questions, we can help them kind of make some peace with where they are. It takes time, but to also reimagine how this is going to be a new future for them. One door closes, another door opens. And so, through that kind of reentry, because, transitions are always 3 steps. It's letting go, it's the messy middle, and it's opening to new. So just like a caterpillar is letting go of being a caterpillar, it's in the chrysalis, that's the messy middle. We don't know how we're going to end up. But then it spreads wings and flies, that's opening to new. So helping clients then, once they start to get through the chrysalis to spread their wings, you can help them make connections of what they might do. It's like this woman became an esthetician. That gentleman who was an attorney became a high school history teacher. And, we help a client, have amazing experiences when they go through transitions, thinking about, let's go to this nonprofit event. Let me introduce you to someone who's in this field that you're interested in. Someone had on a bucket list item. I said, what's a bucket list thing you've never experienced? She said, I've never been in a hot air balloon. So we surprised she and her husband when they retired and put them in a hot air balloon for an experience. So we as advisors can be catalysts to, yes, hold space and empathize, but then through planning and portfolio software, we can actually model out, hey, what could this next chapter look like, and how might it be the best chapter of your life yet?
I think what you said at the outset there is so important. When I was a therapist, I would have to sort of periodically zoom out because you get so engrossed in the minutia, you get so engrossed in the minute-to-minute work of doing your job that you sometimes don't stop and say, holy cow, like this person who's having the worst day of their life came to me, a stranger, and trusted me with their secrets and their heart and their soul and wants me to fix it. And we're in the human transformation business in the advice industry just as surely as we are in the psychology industry. And I think we need to zoom out from time to time and marvel at what an honor that is that people trust us with the intimate details of their financial and personal lives and expect us to have an impact. I think when you frame it with that kind of reverence, like the whole thing changes, right? The whole thing changes. And all the behaviors will follow if you can zoom out and frame it with that lens.
100%. Yeah, the same way we talked about redefining wealth, we almost need to redefine what it means to be in the financial advice world.
Yeah.
We're not just in our heads optimizing portfolios. We're also in our hearts helping to connect with people and helping them be their best selves. So we have to have both of those elements to, I think, really be able to do our job well, especially in this new ever-changing industry where there's more technology competition. But if we're doing what is uniquely human, technology is going to have a hard time competing with that.
Seth, what catalyzes this transition? Because right now, when I look at the data, it's bad, right? So the Edelman Trust Barometer just came out. We're above one industry. We're second to last. And the only industry worse than us is social media, which is like breathtakingly bad. Forbes did a study a few years back that looked at how trusted financial services was as an industry and found that we were slightly less trusted than Congress, and which is staggering, right? Slightly less trusted than Congress and slightly more trusted than used car salespeople. So I hear people like you paint this really compelling, heart-led vision for what the industry could be. And then I look at how it's perceived globally, and it's just, the chasm is very wide. So how do we get there, and how do we change public perception?
Yes. Well, I think the industry in and of itself is evolving, which is great. So it's moving in that direction as we move to more of a fiduciary model where more people are providing comprehensive wealth management services versus just, trading a stock. And consumers are becoming more wise. They understand, hey, for the same 1% or less, I can get all these extra services versus just someone who wants to talk about the markets. Wow, I can have someone help me with taxes and estate planning and my philanthropy plan and have family governance meetings with my family and help me through transitions. And wow, this is a value offering for the same fee. Why would I choose a lesser service? So there's service expansion that is happening in our industry. And I think, what we need to do for those of us who want to be, in this business because our heart and soul is into it, we really deeply care about clients, we care about our coworkers, and we want this industry to evolve forward. It goes back to that self-definition. We are in a privileged seat, and these financial planning conversations become value-based planning. The same way there's now values-based investing, we need to have a mindset of values-based planning. And that goes into far more than just looking at real estate, looking at taxes, looking at your 401k, your IRAs, your Roths, your taxable accounts, and saying, great, here's a financial plan. What are the values that really are meaningful to that family? What is their purpose? How can you help support that purpose further into the world? So we are redefining our role as advisors in this industry. And when we do that, when we see that we're building a cathedral, not just laying bricks, that's how the media is going to take shape. And they're going to see that, wow, these people are really doing great work for the right reasons in an ethical way. And they're not just, selling stocks and doing transactional type of activities. They're serving clients in a very meaningful, heart-based way that's having a significant impact in their lives.
So I'm ready to run through a wall now to be part of an industry that reflects the vision that you've laid out today. And I do think it's changing slowly but surely. And I'm grateful to people like you who are helping to change it. As we close out, I want you to give a commercial one more time. Give us the name of the TED Talk. Tell us where we can find out more about mission, read about the 11 pillars. Where can we find you online?
Sure. Thank you, Daniel. Well, they can go to missionwealth.com. That's the easiest place. And within missionwealth.com, if you want to learn about the coaching segment, that's called Inspired Living. They can also go to SethStreeter.com. I have a bunch of other, podcasts and videos they can see there. And then the TED Talk is The Untethered Life, Wealth Redefined. And so they can just Google my name and look up the TED Talk there. And just really appreciate you sharing what you bring to our whole industry with your podcast. It's a really great show, and it's an honor to be here with you.
No, thank you. The honor's mine. Seth Streeter, thank you for all you do for the industry. Let's work together to make it as good as you believe it can be.
Thank you, Daniel. I'm in.
Thanks for tuning in to Standard Deviations. If you can't wait till next week for more behavioral finance insights, visit www.orion.com. All opinions expressed by Dr. Daniel Crosby and podcast guests are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinion of or endorsement by Orion and its affiliates, subsidiaries, and employees. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for legal, tax, and investment decisions. The opinions are based upon information the participants consider reliable.